Thanks for attending the ISMTE 2021 global event and for joining us for this session, Open Access Business Models Impact in the Asia-Pacific region. I'm Belinda Neal, Editorial Manager of the journal Pathology, which is the journal of the Royal College of Pathologists of Australasia and is published by Elsevier. I volunteer with the ISMTE on the Asia-Pacific Advisory Council. Please say hi in the chat and let us know where you're joining from. We'll hold questions until after the presenters are finished, but feel free to submit your questions at any time during the presentation using the Q&A field. You can indicate which presenter you're asking by typing an @ before the presenter's name, and be sure to upvote questions from other attendees that you find interesting. We'll answer as many questions as possible at the end of the session. So before we get started, our thanks go to our sponsors, AGA, ATIPON, Scholastica, American Chemical Society, Origin Reports, and Cabell's International. Please visit them in the partner section of AirMeet. In this session, we're delighted to have two presenters with us, David Ross and Xi'an Bi, both of whom have agreed to share their knowledge and experience in the open access business models with a focus on the Asia-Pacific region. Various open access business models are available worldwide. Plan S by funders and stakeholders has led to a further shift towards open access publishing, and this field is continuing to develop. This session covers the motivation from publishers to enable and grow open access publishing, and a discussion of various models, as well as open access needs in academic communities, all in the context of the Asia-Pacific region. David will open the session with an overview of various open access models and their growth, and then Xin will discuss these changes in publishing models and their impact on university libraries, both concentrating particularly on the Asia-Pacific region. Our first presenter is David Ross, Vice President, Open Research, Sage Publishing. David is responsible for the strategic direction of open access at Sage, as well as managing Sage's burgeoning open access journals program, including the flagship titles Sage Open and Sage Open Medicine. David is also responsible for the development of the systems, process and policies that support all of Sage's open access publishing activities. More recently, his focus has been shaping Sage's response to the rapidly developing policy landscape and implementing relevant systems and processes. You're good to go, David.
Hello everyone, good morning and good afternoon, depending on where you all are. Just get my slide back. So yes, as Belinda said, I'm going to talk about global open access policy and business models, with a focus on Asia Pacific. But the first thing I would like to start off by is talking a bit about terminology. Now, open access has spawned a huge range of new terms. I mean, I live and breathe this stuff, and I get confused by all the new terms and all the different flavors of open access and all the different types of agreements. So I'm just going to highlight what I'm going to really concentrate on today, and that's really I'm going to focus very much on gold open access as a business model, and that is open access that's paid for via an author side charge, normally known as an article processing charge or an author processing charge, or APC, versus green open access, which is very much more the model where an author is instructed to deposit, generally speaking, an earlier version of their manuscript, the author accepted manuscript, the version that's before it goes into production, before it's published as the version of record. These are the two dominant forms of open access, and these are the ones I'm going to be talking about today. The rest of these, hybrid, platinum, bronze, gold, I mean, they're all different flavors, and there's a whole presentation in its own right to explain exactly what they all are. But I'm going to focus on those two key categories because they're the ones that impact on the business. I'm also going to talk about transformative agreements in the broadest sense, because they're actually the mechanism which provide open access. But again, there's various different terms: read and publish, publishing, retransitional, open access. They're all kind of mean the same thing, but again, I'm not going to go into the detail here, but just to avoid any confusion. And what I'm mainly going to be talking about today is agreements, transformative agreements that are reached between universities, mainly, and consortia, library consortia, and publishers in order to deliver open access. The first thing to note in all of this is that these transformative agreements, while they provide a mechanism, they provide a business model to facilitate open access, they're not an end game. The trick is in the name. They're called transitional agreements in the UK. They are now called transitional agreements. And this is the most recent quote I could find. There's nothing new here, but this is Paul Boy, the Vice Chancellor of Swansea, who's the head of the ESRC, the major social science funder in the UK. And he's just making a point. It's the transitional agreement is not the end game. It's the way to facilitate a move away from subscription publishing towards a more open world. Now that will vary across disciplines. I'm going to come on to that in a moment. But that's the first thing to bear in mind. We are in a kind of in a holding pattern at the moment. This is where the business is now, not where it's going to be in 5 years, 10 years time. I am going to focus on Asia Pacific, but open access is obviously a global issue. It's evidently, authors from all over the world publishing journals, publishing all other parts of the world. So any journal, any publisher has to really pay attention to the global mandate, because that is where there's going to be implications on what they have to do as a business, depending on where the author comes from. It's got nothing to do where the journal is published. So I'm going to do is take you a whistle-stop tour around the global open access policy and the implications it's having on Sage's business mainly. And again, that's a big caveat here. I'm talking very much from Sage's point of view. I don't pretend to talk for the entire publishing industry. Sage has a very particular mix of content. We are historically, our beating heart is very much social science and publishing, but we now do about 50% of our output now is in the STM fields, mainly in clinical medicine and engineering. So that gives us a particular flavour. So this is a very busy slide visually, but that's because a lot is going on in Europe, and this is kind of where the open access movement sort of really began, and various declarations in Berlin and Budapest. But what Linda referenced Planis, Planis sponsored by Coalition S. This is very much an umbrella that sits right across everything that happens in Europe. Again, I'm not going to delve into too much detail into their particular policies, but Planis is very much a kind of an advocacy organisation. What matters in the UK and in Europe and what's different in Europe is that you have national funding agencies and national university consortia working hand in hand to deliver open access, and that matters. So if you take an example in the UK, you have UKRI as the funding agency, and that has issued a mandate that says all research that is funded by them, direct grant funded by them, must be made open access. But that doesn't cover all the research that's published in the UK. That only publishes stuff that's direct grant funded, and in the social sciences, most research is not direct grant funded. But that's where JISC come in. JISC is the university consortia, and they work very, very closely with UKRI. They're both part of the same department. They're both part of the same government. And JISC will not renew their subscriptions with a publisher, with a major publisher at least, without it having an open access policy. So that impacts all the research published out in the UK. So again, funding agencies through Planis are making these demands, but they're kind of the facilitators of it very much are the university consortia, and they're working very closely hand in hand. And that's true of the UK, it's true of the Netherlands, it's true of Sweden, Norway, Finland, and in Germany, you've got something slightly different going on. But the point of it, the outcome of all this is that virtually all the research in Northern Europe is now made open access via transformative agreements. And those agreements essentially are for some additional small fees, but more or less the existing read fees, subscription fees, are then repurposed for publication fees. And all the research in Northern Europe is now made gold open access at the point of publication, the version of record. What's going on in America and North and South? It's very different historically. Obviously, Latin America is very separate. There is no high levels of funding there for research. They haven't historically had large subscription holdings, and they've very much gone their own local research has been published on a platform called Scale. So I've taken them slightly out of the equation for the purposes of this presentation. But in North America, historically, you've had effectively a sort of a mix of a green and a gold model. The NIH OA mandate is probably the oldest mandate out there. I think it's 2008, and that was original. And what that has meant is that demanded that all research that was funded by the NIH, the biggest funding agency in the world, I think it's got a budget of 34 billion last time I looked, it's deposited in their platform called PubMed. PubMed Central has become the go-to place for medical research, and it's been probably the most successful mandate. Now, it's not pure open access in some people's eyes because it doesn't have any licensing requirements, no CC by licensing, and it allows for embargoes. But 99% of all research funded by or research articles that come from grants provided by NIH are deposited in PubMed Central. And they're available publicly, openly to the world after generally a 6 or a 12-month embargo. Back in 2013, the OSTP, the Office of Science Technology Policy, basically the White House, demanded that all the funding agencies in the US follow the same, adopt. Their instruction was to figure out how to provide open access, and what happened was that all the other funding agencies decided to go down a very similar route as the NIH, and Chorus was born, and that's a collective, publisher collective, which is a way of delivering all material that isn't published by the NHS or the NSF and all the other major funding agencies. But again, it's not pure OA what they're doing, because there is no CC by licensing. It's not immediately available. There are embargoes are allowed, but it is providing open access after some embargo period. What's changing in the US now, though, is that the consortia, you'll never have the same situation in the US as you will in Europe, because it's the federal nature of the states. You don't have the funding agencies working hand in hand with a national consortia. It's just not the way the system is. But so what's happening now is you're getting individual local consortia, like statewide consortia. CDL is the key one, California Digital Library, which is negotiates licenses for the entire California system. They are now starting to demand transformative agreements, very much the same as Northern European style one. Slightly different. They want different slightly different multiplayer models where funders contribute a little bit of the publication charge, and they'll contribute the rest. But that's beginning to shift the US market a little bit closer to Europe, and it's gone from being this very embargoed version of records, but without CC licensing in PubMed and Chorus, to actually more the version of record being made available at the point of publication with Creative Commons licensing, and that's spreading through the system. The CDL are the kind of vanguard of this, and most publicly has been their fallout in recent agreement with Elsevier. But the other consortia, and the ones I put up here, VIVA's the Virginia State Consortia, the University of Texas system, there's individual institutions, and we have a deal with UNC Chapel Hill. Again, this isn't supposed to be comprehensive. I'm not mentioning everyone. This is just to give you a sense of what's generally happening. Finally, on the Americas, Canada is in a slightly different place as well. They have a very tight consortia there. CRKN is the key player in Canada, and they too are adopting a Northern European model. And many of the large publishers have entered agreements with them, a very similar level, where for the existing subscription spend plus some extras, but extra, then the version of record is made available open access at the point of publication. So coming on to Asia-Pacific, it's sort of a very different story that's developed in Asia-Pacific. Probably, Australia was with the forefront of the movements in this region, but they went down the green route. They decided that it was the best way to provide open access would be to insist, and it is a mandate, and it's probably the one of the best green mandates, or the most effective green mandates in the world, because virtually they developed a very good repository system, and virtually all of Australia's funded research is now deposited in institutional repositories, in networked institutional repositories. But it is a green version. It is an earlier version. The author said a manuscript, and sometimes embargoes are allowed, and other times they're not. But it hasn't impacted so much on the business of publishing. I'll come on to what the broader impacts of all of this on our businesses are. But there's no transaction, if you like, between the libraries and the university. That is beginning to change. But just sort of like whistling around the rest of Asia Pacific, very similar. No one has adopted a strong gold mandate in Asia Pacific, and the various different regions, countries and regions there have adopted different versions of a green mandate, but they're all still not requiring or not enabling the final version of record to be made available through some kind of author side charge. Just finally on the policy landscape, China, the point of this slide really is just to make the point that I believe you had a presentation on China policy, China open access previously. There's many stakeholders in China, and actions of these players. This isn't strictly about open access, but they are changing the behaviour of authors in China. You've got the MST directed policy, which is encouraging Chinese authors to publish much more research in local journals, shift away from international journals. You have the NSFC, the biggest funder in China. They've basically reduced the requirement of the number of grants and the number of research articles you're allowed to use when you're applying for a grant. It used to be endless, so people felt the need to provide a list as long as your arm. Now it's strictly limited to 5 of your best research papers. That's significantly affecting how people publish in China. And then you've got Chinese Academy of Science and Chinese Academy of Social Science. They're very active in this space, monitoring and making and issuing watch lists, and that's backed up by the institutions themselves, which are very careful about where they publish. And that's all impacting on publication activity. It's not, as I said, it's not necessarily OA itself, but it is changing the way that Chinese authors act. So just a final point on that side, that wasn't supposed to be comprehensive. I didn't mention every policy by any long shots. There is something called RAWMAP, which is the Registry of Open Access Repository Mandates. That will tell you, you'll see below, follow that link, you'll see that will take you to a link to every single mandate requirement in the world, split by different categories. So yeah, if I missed something out in all of that someone you noticed, then that's why it wasn't supposed to be comprehensive. It's pretty much indicative. So just my last final sort of 4 slides, I think maybe to talk about what the impact of all this is. From a business point of view, what's happening here is that we are operating in 2 different modes. We have a subscription model, which supports facilitates the wider dissemination of research paid for by the libraries, and now we have the open access side, which is also. We are going to be operating with both models for the foreseeable future. I don't see. We are in a transition, but the transition is going to take. It has taken a long time so far. Things have accelerated in the last 5, 6, 7 years, but we're still going to be in this dual mode. So for a business that has its complications, because you have to, as Linda said, part of my job is developing internal systems that support all this, because the systems we have that support the legacy business, as we call it, subscription business, are very, very different. Back to the social science side of things, a lot of this mad transition to open access to an author side charge, it can work in highly funded areas, and it's not even an STM HSS world. It's actually high funded versus low funded. So it's biomedicine, where most you have £1 million plus grants. It's very easy to take $2,000 and play an APC. 50% of what Sage publishes is zero funded. So there is no money available to pay APCs. How are we going to make social science research open access? That is a big challenge, and it's something is a key part of my role, is trying to figure that out. The knock-on effect of all this is that we have an ever-increasing amounts of our subscription products are open access, and that has implications. There's various. It's hard to really put a finger on exactly how much of any publisher's portfolio is open, particularly because the green route, where stuff is freely available in distributed repositories, it's hard to know exactly how much is out there and how much is discoverable from a reader's point of view. But we are 20% of our Premier package, that's our sort of big deal, is now open access, and that has a knock-on effect, because obviously subscribers are sort of looking at that and saying, well, that's if only 80% of it is behind paywall, then we're going to require reductions. So yeah, that's this is the migration here is quite complicated. What it's also done is introduce a lot more competition. Again, this is a good thing. I'm a very strong believer in competitive markets. It's increased that there's been whole new players come in, from people like MBPI to Frontiers to Hindawi. Every major publisher is also having, as we have, developed a pure open access program. We now publish 20% of our content is published in pure open access journals, separate from our subscription business. All this led to a huge amount more competition, and the rise of what has been called predatory publishers as well, which basically are slightly fraudulent, some of them very fraudulent publishers who are basically extracting money out of the market, and that's tarnished the name of open access in some people's eyes, but it's also just made our jobs as prestige quality publishers that much more difficult to establish the model. From an internal point of view, there's so much stuff we have to do now in articles on submission. We have to look at articles, look at funders, and then look at and decide what mandates are applicable here, and help the author decide what they do. And then on post publication, because of all the mandates, we have to take a lot of there's further actions we need to do, i.e., to deposit things in Chorus or in PubMed Central or in various repositories on behalf of the author. Again, that's all placed a burden on the business. From an author's point of view, I mean, I think the main thing here is confusion. One of our big jobs, one of my jobs, I spend a lot of time talking to authors and editors of journals, and just trying to explain all this. I mean, as I said right at the beginning, this is my job. I live and breathe this, and it's very complicated and it's very difficult. From the author point of view, who publishing a paper that might be based on research contributed from 3 different funders, and each of those funders will have a slightly different policy. Helping them navigate that landscape is becoming a key part of our job. From a compliance point of view, where authors can actually publish is going to be restricted more and more, because unless your journal allows, or particularly in a sort of Plan S context where there's additional requirements around price transparency, for one, and then the rights retention strategy that they talk about a lot. Authors aren't going to be able to publish exactly where they wanted to, as they did in the past. And again, enabling that, planners have developed this journal checker tool, which is only in beta version, which allows authors to search, but it's not working very well at the moment. And again, so we as the publishers become the gatekeeper of that. And again, from the author point of view, they have to do additional things on submission now, and on publication, they themselves have to do take certain other actions. And my final point here is about open data. What I've been talking about so far has all been about the business of publishing academic research articles. The data that underlies them is also, that's the next vanguard. I think you'll see all these funding agencies I've been talking about starting to demand that the data is available open access. Now, there is no real business model behind the publication of open data yet. Data in the past rather, and there's no real way of migrating that across. But that is all going to become wrapped up. But I think more and more, particularly authors, need to be aware there is going to be greater and greater requirement for their data to be made available. And this is my last slide. Just a very quick bit of sort of like future gazing. I mean, I think the point here with the crystal ball is that no one has one. And I think if anyone tells you exactly that they know exactly where the market's going to end up in the next 5 to 10 years, I think that's particularly true, because there are so many moving parts at the moment. We are on this journey. I think what you are definitely going to see is a continuation of more and more research being made open access, and that's going to complicate. That's going to have these knock-on effects. But it's that. Where's this tipping point? I don't believe in tipping points particularly, but there will come a point where we're all trying to work through these transformative agreements to shift the market from paywall subscription material to free to read, free to reuse, published material, paid for on the author side. And there is a sense that there's enough money in the system, but how you facilitate those 2 systems, or how you run those 2 systems in parallel whilst you make the transformation, is the thing that I focus on, and I think, and I struggle with every day. So that's all I was going to say. I will now stop sharing and hand over to Xin.
Actually, I'll just jump in there first, if that's okay. Thanks, David. That was really good. We appreciate your thoughts and expertise in this area. Okay, so our second and final presenter in this session is Dr. Xin Bi. He is currently the Director of the Centre for Knowledge and Information and Director of the University Learning Mall in Xi'an Jiaotong-Liverpool University in Suzhou, China. In his role, he is leading the IT, Educational Technology, University Marketing and Communication, Library, Museum, and also online education for the university. Xin established the library, museum, and learning mall from scratch for the university. Over to you, Xin.
Thank you, Belinda, for the introduction, and thank you, David, for the very wonderful presentation and give the general background of the open access. So I'm going to share my slides first. Okay, so I'm going to talk about from the perspective from a university library, and when talk about this, I would like to say we are a university library in China, and also our university is a joint venture university founded by Liverpool University from UK and also Xi'an Jiaotong University, which is one of the top universities in China. So we are a truly international university. The faculties and staff member and the students came from around 100 different countries and regions from all over the world. And also we provide bachelor, a master, and a PhD education to students. So we also have a very, very wide network of research around the world. And also in 2020, from the ESI, we have 3 subjects: science, engineer, and also humanity and social science entering the top 1% of ESI. So we are a new university, only 15 years as our history, very short, but we are developing very fast. And we got around 1,600 staff members, and including 800 academic staff, very diversified background. So that's our university. This will help to understand what we do in terms of open access later on. So indeed, I am the one who created the library for our university, and I'm still the university librarian. So in my role, so I have a very wide network with libraries around China, and also as also David mentioned, in other countries there's also library consortium, some organizations that unite all the libraries. It is also true in China. We have a national level library consortium, and also we have a provincial. In each province, we have a organization of all the libraries. So we have lots of meetings, conference, and communication. And what I can tell is that open access is people truly is looking into, starting from at least 5 or 6 years ago. The librarians are looking into the open access and to think of how we could react to this. So I also want to mention that since 2016, I started to work for DOAJ, the Index for Open Access Journals, as an ambassador of China, and also the editor who are looking after the Asia area. So also in this capacity, I have already worked with many editors in Asia, and some from the big publishers, some from small publishers, and some just a professor who created their own open access journal. So a very wide network connecting the publisher and also from the university libraries. So we observed that actually my colleague prepared these slides for me. So we can see that from Scopus and from SCI, SSCI, the fully pure open access journals now could counted as around 20% of the total journals. So if you check on the DOAJ website, you can see we got nearly 1,700 open access journals listed in DOAJ. And also, if you want to look into the Chinese open access journals in DOAJ, you will find the number is 188. So for this, I want to give you more information. Actually, 3 years ago, I did a little research. So I had a little team to check quite many different websites of publishers in China. And also, I wrote an article, and it was published on DOAJ website many years ago. So in my research, I just found there are in China we have around 5,000 journals, which is mainly owned by the research institute, hospital, universities, and some state-owned publishers. So in the 1,200 journals I checked on their website, they just provide all their content freely accessed. So why it does not appear on DOAJ? Because they just don't. They made some, for example, the open access statement or copyright, some CC Creative Commons license, something like that. So they're not listed in DOAJ. But what the point here that if you only look into the DOAJ data, you think that China is very small, playing very small in open access, but actually it is not true. Quite many journals in China, they are freely provide their content online for free access already. This is the point here from research article from Bjork, which is very well known in the research area of open science. So we also, as David mentioned that from different country, different continent, it is not balanced, right? So in some country, the open science is very strong, and in some it is not so strong. So I just want to mention that in China, open access has been very well known at least 5 or 6 years ago. So I think everyone in universities, libraries, they know open access. But we and also I see just in the one of the audience from Tsinghua University, and she left already. So I know the publisher Tsinghua University Press. A few years ago, they have many journals published by the university, and a few years ago they got 10 journals published in English, and it is open access. And they do have the plan to increase the number of it from 10 to 15. And also it's the same in Zhejiang University, which is one of another top universities in China. They also do the same thing because according to the national some funding, we call it excellent journal project, something like that. So they have been encouraged to publish more high quality open access journals. So that's a situation here in China about publishing. And also we can see it's uneven that the SMT, science, technology, medicine, they go more away, but each humanity and social science, we do not have so many open access journals yet. So librarians, I don't know what's the situation in other country, but in China, I think the very common sense is that actually people think open access is good, but also libraries they still do not see the point to change, because actually the universities still have a lot of funding from government, and also they are still quite fine with the current status, the situation, to pay for the subscription. So our consortium here, the library consortium, play a very important role in negotiating a very good price with publishers. But until now, I still don't see that much about the consortium libraries trying to do something that transactions change from the subscription to pay for the APC yet. So but also from our users, users in universities, faculties, the very senior professors, I quite often will say they are reluctant to publish with OA. but young faculties, young researchers, they are very active, and also they see a very good opportunity to get the research published. But also there are also always concern about the quality of the open access publishing. So that's why in our university, I organized in 2017 and 2018, I organized 2 international conferences to promote these open access ideas to our university staff member, faculty, students, and also the publishers in the cities nearby. And also libraries found that we could play find a new role in open access. That means to help the faculties and students to identify the quality, very good open access journals, and also how to avoid some predatory journals, something like that. So could do something in the training to help people to avoid some lost or some cheat in the publishing. And also our library, and I do think some other libraries have already integrated other open access resources into our collection. For example, in our university, we have the discovery system, and also the DOAJ metadata and other open access journal metadata from Web of Science and from other major publishers have been created together. So when users search, they will search and get all the results, including open access journals. I think what we could do, even though we do not see much happening, why it is not happening, I think because the assessment of the researchers is now changed. So that, for example, in China, we still very value the citations and also the impact factors of journals. So if those things is now changed, so we do not see that people will really change to publish with OA. So library could also play a role in negotiating feasible transformative agreements with publishers. We see 1 or 2 cases in China already. And also we could help to the university to establish the process. So in the future, if everything is open access, that means actually they do not have to go through library. So if library do not take any action at this moment, they might lose their positions in the future. So being very actively involved in the open access development at this moment will gain a better position in the future. And also library could help to get different parties together to in terms of the cost neutrality and the financing things, the cost balance. And also a library, as I said, we could organize trainings, conference, meetings to promote open access among researchers. And also it is quite often it's very hard to get university management to understand what is OA and why it is important. And often library will be consulted about where to publish, because now as a researcher you may receive many emails, advertisement emails from publishers saying you could publish with us. So libraries could help the faculties by using libraries' expertise, experience to help people to identify those quality ones. And also the growing OA in our university, it's a university repository, is still a very important thing to do. But also, as library is establishing institutional repository, it's also not easy thing, because faculties or researchers, they do not think they should have to spend effort on this to help the libraries. Do not see the point from the values from their point of view. But I still see that green OA is a good way as one of the forms of open access. So last year, NSLC signed a transformative agreement with Oxford University Press, and that's as reported as first transformative agreement in China. So it's still very hard because actually I'm not so active in open science in the recent 2 or 3 years. But as far as I heard, that it's quite challenging because for university library or for any organization who is going to pay for either the subscription or the APC, it's always very hard. For example, some research, uh, um, some organization, for example, the Chinese Academy of Science, they publish a lot. So if they want to change the payment model, then they may even pay much higher cost of fees to the publishers. So I think that's might be the reason they want to stay the current subscription model. Um, so also another reason is that actually China is quite huge. Even for one province, it's still very huge. We got even for one province, we could have more than 70, 60 universities. Not to say there are many research institutes. It's very hard to get everyone on the same table to discuss. So, but we could see that we are going on that direction. There are more and more OA journals published already. So let's just wait and see what is going to happen in the near future. And until now, we do not have a national level OA mandates. We have some mandates from some major organization, for example, Chinese Academy of Science, and also National Science and Library. That's another library kind organization is supporting the nation, the whole nation, for the research resources provision. They have mandate. So we could say that because they are national level organization, so it's a kind of signal or message that we do have something not really national level, but from national level organizations, research intensive organizations, they already have their mandate, encourage the people to publish with OA and also to archive their subscription in the current OA repositories. That happened quite a few years ago. From our collection, we could see the share of gold OA, gold hybrid publications has reached nearly 25%. So we are also see there are many more in our collection going to be open accessed. And also from the daily operation, we do have received queries from our researchers whether they could go to this read and publishing model. And also quite often people will confused about XGTLU and the UL. They think our university is one of the branch of University of Liverpool, which is not. We are independent university. So lots of things like that. But our university do have policy encouraging people to publish and also to fund their publication in open access journals. Very interesting, as I heard that people are trying to develop also a blacklist, not a whitelist. They are still just develop a list, say these are journals we do not encourage you to publish with. So that's also something happening in our university. Also, the publishing with OA is increasing in our university, so we do not have enough fund to support that. And also, the APC is quite expensive, quite in the most of the time. And also, we do see the difference in different schools. Some schools, they are okay with publishing with OA, but some schools, for example, the business school, they are seeking to publish always with a journals with established reputation, very high impact factor, something like that. And also we do have an IR, but also we do not have university level policy to encourage or to make it mandatory for researchers to deposit. So that's also something we are still in a progress to deal with. What we could do in the future, so we hope to have a national level OA legislation, but it's very hard to influence the central government. It's not easy, but we will see how it goes. And but it is very possible that we could work in the institutions national consortium level or the provincial libraries level to promote the open access journal, open access. And also in our university, we could further to refine our OA publishing policy and also increase awareness of OA, because still some people don't think OA is good quality, something like that. But actually, even with a print publication, some journals still is the same. It's not of high quality. So that's we need more trainings and to increase awareness. And also, it's very good that ICTME is organizing this kind of conference, so we could keep updated with the latest OA and publishing trends. So I think that's my last slide. Thank you for having me here, and very good to have the opportunity to share my experience. Thank you.
Thanks, Xin. That was really interesting from an academic library perspective. So thanks for giving us that viewpoint. Okay, so let's see if there's any questions in the Q&A. None at the moment. So let's see if anyone posts any questions. I have one. I'm not sure that it's something that you were anticipating talking on. So, but I just wanted to ask, obviously there's a push and pull between, obviously librarians, things are changing quickly for you. You want to make sure that everything's kept to a point where libraries are still relevant and useful, because they're obviously very important institutions. And the same with publishers. You're obviously trying to, make sure that this doesn't move too fast and doesn't become something that turns into a complete schmozzle. So my question was, did the pandemic last year create any obviously it created difficulties for everybody, but for both of you in terms of your institutions and things changed so quickly. Things had to be lots of articles were made open access simply because people needed access. Do you think that that's made things get away from you a little bit, or do you think that you can still manage to make this transition something that's going to benefit everyone and become something that is a positive in the end? And that question is to both of you. So, Xin, I think you've got your microphone on. So if you want to answer first, that'd be great.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, that's a very good question. And definitely, since the pandemic outbreak last year, we do see that people, because for a period of time, everybody is stuck at home and could have only to work online or learning to teach online and to study online. So that actually increased the usage of the e-resources of the library. And also, I think also that's a very good opportunity for some people. They might just recognize that also the exercise is so important that when you want to use something, you could have access immediately. I do see some reports on this, and I think that's a pandemic definitely facilitate the awareness of open access, and also to facilitate people to embrace open access and to move forward to it in the future.
David, did you want to comment on that?
Sure, yeah. I mean, yes, I think is the simple answer. If you like, I think it has. It's demonstrated the power of a more open world in terms of the sharing of research information and the ability globally of research networks to react to that. And I think one of the other things is kind of, and also it's stimulated the use of preprints in the market as well, which again is another kind of route to open access. And then obviously this happens in any public health crisis, really. Obviously, this is the biggest public health crisis, in modern history. So the idea that you can wait for the peer review process to take its course, and sometimes that can take years before an actual research article is finally published and released, albeit in an open model, is still, in the fields of virology and epidemiology, as we've seen, it can't wait that long. So what you've seen is a massive upsurge in the use of preprints, and of course, I think I didn't touch on it here through lack of time, but preprints as a way of enabling openness in a sort of pre-peer review world comes with a lot of health warnings, particularly in a medical context, but it's definitely a way to deliver that. And I think that the pandemic has nudged the needle significantly in that direction too. But yeah, I mean, simply put, yeah, I think any public health crisis does demonstrate the power or the benefits of open access.
Yeah. And we've got a question in the Q&A section from Anchor in Perth. Does the lack of Plant S compliant policies and OA publication opportunities in the Asia-Pacific region impact on establishing international research collaborations with researchers in the EU and US?
Yeah, I think that's probably for me to take on that one. That was in the chat for a while. Thanks for the question, Anchor. And I've been pondering it. I think the simple answer probably is not yet, not at the moment. But I think everyone, and this goes, I think everyone involved, all the stakeholders involved, from the most ardent advocates, funders, to everyone, that understands the limitation here, and very much the focus on mandates and the compliance of mandates has until now been very much on corresponding author, and then that's literally a functional issue. Is that everything we do as a publisher is run by the corresponding author. They are our point of contact. Until we don't know, we don't even know the contact details for multiple authors. And in some fields, because the obvious always one's quoted, you have papers that are published that have hundreds of authors. But it's always all these mandates are only applied to corresponding authors. So it hasn't. So as long as you basically historically have complied with the corresponding author's mandate, whether it be funder, university, consortia, government, then no, it hasn't been a problem. But that is changing, and more, and Plan S is particularly coming to publishers now, saying, no, we want you to apply the various different mandates or to take actions required by the mandates applying to all authors, and that's, I think, where you might start to see some hesitancy. I almost see it slightly the other way round from you asking the question. I don't think the fact there aren't opportunities in the AP region restricting collaboration in that way. I think more, Plan S is a good example. It's right retention strategy. There's some very strict conditions that Plan S wants to impose on rights, on the copyright of the papers, which a lot of authors won't be comfortable with, and therefore they may not want to collaborate with people who are based in have funding based Plan S signatory funding. So it's a very good question, but I think the simple answer has been not until now, but definitely I think in the coming years that is going to be an issue.
Thanks, David. Xin, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that?
No, none from me. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, there's no further questions in the Q&A section, so I think that's it for our session. So I would like to thank both of you for presenting. So David Ross and Dr. Xin Bi from SAGE and also the university. And if you're on social media, use our hashtag ISMTE Global to find and share content. And please head over to the Exchange forum after this session to discuss a topic of your choice. Thanks to both of you.
Thank you
very much.
Bye.